Welcome to this new episode of MetaWell. Cecil, how are you? Are you doing well?
I'm doing really well. I'm doing great. I'm feeling good. I know you got some stuff going on inside of you.
I got a bit of a cold. I don't know how you get a cold in the middle of July, but that's what I've done.
Somebody has to have it, so I'm glad you're taking one for the team. Meanwhile, I feel great.
Good. I'm gonna do my best not to pass this on to you, and if I do, I'm gonna say it's your own fault. I don't know why, but that's what I'm saying.
I'll take that as permission to stay far away from you then.
Which is kind of an ironic thing given the topic that we're going to talk about today. Um, but today we're going to talk a little bit about social well-being and how we can kind of bolster our sense of well-being as far as social interactions go. So I'm just going to take it as a personal affront that you're going to stay as far away as possible.
I'm gonna risk the social part of my health to save the physical part of my health.
I can see how it's a bit of a delicate balance here, and I guess I won't hold it against you.
Thank
Uh,
you. Thanks for understanding.
it's my pleasure, my pleasure. But in that regard, when you hear the term social well-being, I don't think it's a term that we like talk a whole lot about, although I think it's kind of like always there under the surface, and I think people kind of like hint at social well-being, but we don't often label it, call it social well-being. So when you hear that term, when you think about that idea, what comes to mind for you? How do we know if we're socially well?
I think it's an interesting one because so far of the ones we've talked about, this one kind of feels more complicated to me, even though ironically we both are trained as family therapists. This is like the stuff we were looking at, in school and in all the books and theories that we're looking at. A short framing of it, social well-being is your relationship to your social environment and really your relationship to the relationships that you have, not just one-on-one relationships, but to all of the groups and systems that you belong to. Your family, of course, but your community, the different components of your identity, the literal, collections around you that you belong to, the town you live in, but the society that you're a part of, maybe even just general peopleness around you, what you think about people and your relationship to people in general. So I feel like it's kind of self-explanatory how complicated that can be and all the layers that can have and all the different ways that you can interact with not only another person, but your relationship to people in general. But to keep it in simple terms, to make this digestible, I think it's a really crucial part of well-being because it's easy to overlook how much we need and also need to respond to our need for socialization, the right amount and the appropriate kind of socializing. Obviously, people have different amounts that they are in need of. I believe I am on the lower end. Kind of like a camel doesn't need to drink water every single day and every moment. But all the living things need water, and all human beings need some kind of social component to their functioning. In fact, in the most extreme cases, your mental well-being breaks down very drastically when you find yourself without any kind of social contact or any kind of social interaction. So I think that really shows how important this component is, even though it's something very easy to take for granted.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with what you said, and I really like the analogy of kind of living things needing water. Some living things need lots and lots of water, and other living things need a little bit of water. And you know that I have no green thumb, so I'm not a gardener in any sense of the word. But one of the things that I realized is there was one plant that I got, and I think it was, I don't remember what it's called, but it's like these long, skinny, thin, like just pokey up things. I don't, again, this tells you how much of a gardener I am.
think I know which one
And
that is, but I maybe have an idea.
it started getting like brown spots on it. So I Googled, I was like, why is this plant with these long spiky things, why is it getting brown spots? And it said, you're overwatering. You're getting it really only needs a tiny bit of water and about like once every 10 days or something. And I just was on the like once a week and I just like, fill up the pot with water and so it was like it was getting overwatered. I didn't think that was possible. I was like, how could you overwater a plant? That's the only thing they need. So I do like that analogy because I think that people need different amounts of social interaction. But that begs the question, how how do you know? If we're aiming at well-being and everybody's sense of well-being is different, how can I know how much social interaction I need to feel well?
How do you know when you've eaten too much or too little?
If you come back to it's just a feeling, I'm gonna be like, oh wait, I need some more specificity here.
Or if we stuck with even the water example, how do you, because I think that's probably vaguer than just hunger. How do you know when you've had too much water or not enough water? It's you're reading and paying attention to your functioning. We might assume like, oh, if you haven't had enough water, you're dying of thirst. You're like, super, super parched. But what if you just are like underneath the amount that you probably should be having, but it's not quite to the drastic point of I'm in extreme thirst? Still there would be signs that you're looking at that tell you you could take in more water. I think it's I'm not a medical doctor, so maybe this analogy shouldn't be in my wheelhouse, but it does affect like your energy levels. It affects digestion. It affects all these kinds of things. What's going on inside of your kidneys? What's going on in your blood? Some of those things are very perceptible, easy to be perceived just by a person living their normal life. Maybe some of those things aren't so easy to perceive, but there are signs. This does impact your functioning. And I think the same happens for social well-being. You obviously should be able to maybe pick up on some signs that the relationships in your life aren't optimal. Usually, other people will send some signals that this could be working better. But in terms of just how you feel because of your socialization, I think it's a kind of similar thing. It can be vague, but you should be paying attention to it. You should be trying to interpret the signs. You should be combining, these signs of what's going on inside of you and around you to be able to piece together. I think this means I am falling out of sync with what I need socially. Either these socializations that I am having are not quite working in the ways that they should, or maybe I'm not getting enough. Maybe I'm getting too many, too much. I'm splitting myself in too many directions, or I'm giving too much of my energy and my time. All different kinds of variations of that. But I think there's signs to be looked at for that kind of thing. It's probably similar signs. You probably might be exhausted. You probably might feel like, I don't feel like I have enough to do my ordinary day with all this stuff that I seem to have in it. I think it's we haven't really said this yet, but I feel like it's usually similar signs that something's out of whack. Is you don't feel great, something's wrong.
Yeah, I think one of the things that stands out to me as you talk, and going back to a couple of the other episodes that we've had, is that in order to achieve kind of a state of well-being, there has to be a knowing of yourself. There has to be a lot of self-awareness, but there also has to be a lot of like productivity, like proactivity, that like I'm taking a proactive step to make this a priority. And I hear in your answer like those things become requirements again, where I have to know, okay, am I a person who thrives on a lot of social interaction? Am I a person who thrives on a little social interaction? Am I a person who thrives in big groups? Am I a person who thrives in small groups? How much alone time do I need? And I think we may not inherently know that right off the top. And so it takes almost some experimentation and then some self-observation to say, when I did this, what impact did that have on me and on my emotional state and on my sense of tiredness? And so I think that it's going to take a little bit of like back and forth and experimenting and then taking note and really being purposeful about saying, okay, I think I've found a sweet spot. But the other thing I think that it requires is just like a lot of these other things, some flexibility. That my sweet spot in one day or one week might be in a different place than it is another day, another week, given kind of external events. And one of the things that it reminds me of a bit, and you kind of mentioned at the beginning, you and I are trained in systems theory and like how do systems work and all those kinds of things. And Bronfenbrenner has a theory, the socio-ecological theory, and it looks at like me and then kind of all of my concentric circles of interaction that I interact with my immediate family and interact with my extended family and I interact with then my city or town, my kind of larger system. And ultimately, it gets to these really big systems of being like my country, my world, my external systems. So each concentric circle, one of the things I really like about Bronfenbrenner's model is that it's not a unidirectional experience of I interact with all of these things, but at times all of these systems interact with me, right? And you can see that like in a particularly like hostile political climate, then my big external system is going to be impacting me personally. So where my well-being is it's not entirely up to me. It's not like I feel like I need this much interaction, but maybe it's me taking into consideration right now there's a lot of influence coming from these big macro systems. And so I need to pull back a bit. I need to pull out of that. Maybe I need to watch less news. Maybe I need to talk to people about politics less. Maybe I need to, right? So where it is in one week or one year, if it's a political year, maybe I have more to give. Maybe I have less to give. So I think thinking about it in those concentric circles of impact helps me to then realize, well, maybe if this big macro system is pressing in quite a bit, maybe that means I need to distance from that system a bit, but pull in my more immediate family and friends circle a bit more to get some support, to find some relief, to find, humor or leisure time. And so I think that Bronfenbrenner's model of these concentric circles can kind of help moderate how do I find wellness within these various systems that I have.
So I think you're opening the door to us getting more specific about how to respond to if we feel like our social well-being is suffering or it's not in a good place. Um, and I think, I don't want people to brush past social well-being and think of it as just am I talking to people that I know or not? Because I don't think it's that simple. I mean, you just really illustrated for us the depth of it using that model. So I think there's lots of specifications to these different angles of our social well-being, not just do I have friends and things like that, or am I connected to my family? Am I talking to people? Am I going out? But it's do I feel supported? Do I have trust in the people around me? What do I think about the people in the place where I live, the people that I work with? Do I feel a part of a community or do I feel isolated in the community? Do I feel like, relationships are a good thing to depend on, or do I feel like they're a hassle, they're a burden? It's all these different angles and tiny little facets to this chunk of our well-being, and how we kind of live and function within that. But that brings us to the question of then how do we start to change what our social well-being looks like, which maybe might require knowing what is our social well-being, what are the things that comprise our social well-being.
I think those are good questions. I'll maybe answer them in the reverse order. Like, how do we know what comprises it? It goes back to what we've talked about in previous episodes of like, is my emotional state in a good place? Is my intellectual state in a good place? And is my physical state in a good place? And so I think social interactions, social wellness is going to interact with all of these other components of wellness. So I think we have to kind of look at it in a holistic place and say, how am I functioning overall? And so I think that's part of it. And I think also the like, how do I know? Again, I think we can look at Bronfenbrenner's like multicentric circles and say, do I feel sustained by these various circles? Do I feel supported by these various interactions that I have? Do I feel like I make a contribution? It actually then kind of shifts me into the second part And in that instance, a different theory or model comes to my mind, and that is Corey Key's social well-being model. And he actually highlights five kind of questions that we can ask ourselves that help us to realize, like, kind of assess how am I doing? And in that series of questions that you just threw out, you asked a couple of them. So that's kind of what brought it to my mind. And I think the first, he kind of has, again, these five components. And the first component is the social interaction. And basically, he's saying, do I feel a part of a community? Do I feel a part of a family? Do I feel a part of a religious belief system, a worship group? Do I feel a part of a political group? Do I feel, right? So do I feel connected? Do I feel like I belong? But then he goes on to a second level, which is a social contribution. And he says, do I feel like I'm making a difference? And you can again put kind of overlap these questions with Bronfenbrenner's model, and you can say, do I feel like I'm making a difference in my immediate family? Do I feel like I'm making a difference in my extended family? Do I feel like I'm making a difference in my community? So the way that I make a contribution might be quite different from level to level, but I think that we can ask ourselves that question at each of those levels. The third factor that Keyes comes back to is my social coherence. And the question that he asked about this is, does the world make sense to me? And again, if you put that in the various concentric circles, then the answer may be yes or no, depending on which of those circles that you're in. But when I think about my society, when I think about my family systems, if it's understandable, if it's logical, if it makes sense to me, I feel like I belong. And we know that one of the major epidemics of this time period is loneliness. Despite how much social interaction is possible because of virtual interactions, because of social media and those kinds of things, we have more people today saying, I feel all alone. The world doesn't feel like I cohere to that world very well. I feel like nobody really understands me. And I think that that social coherence, does it make sense to me? Is it logical? Is it understandable? I think we're getting farther and farther away from that in many instances. So I think this is where a big rub comes in. Then he has two others, and the fourth one is social actualization. And he said, and with that question, he says, do I believe that society can improve? And you can hear in this level a component of hope. Do I have hope in these systems? If I've lost hope that the system can grow, that can reach its potential, that things could get better, my social well-being will be jeopardized because why would I contribute to something that I don't feel like is worthwhile to contribute? That it's not, there's no positive outcome that's going to be resulting from this. And then the last component that he talks about is social acceptance. And the question is, do I trust and accept other people? And you can hear if social actualization of this, like, can it be improved? If that starts to wane, then this fifth level of social acceptance, do I accept other people? That starts to wane because why would I put hope in people? Why would I trust in people? Why, if I don't think that we can actually get better, why would I put any semblance of belief in other people? And so this social acceptance starts to deteriorate. So now I really feel like I'm on an island of my own and I can't trust people and I can't let people into my circle. And you can see how it just could turn into a downward spiral. Whereas on the other hand, if I hold on to this hope and I say, you know what, the world could get better, my society could get better, my community could get better, then I start putting trust in people and saying, maybe you're one of the people who could make it better. And so I think those five levels or those five different areas that helps us to kind of assess how is my well-being? Do I feel a part? Do I feel like I can make a difference? Do I feel like I can trust in other people? Does the world make sense to me? Those kinds of things help me realize where am I in this realm of social well-being? That was a really long answer. I don't know if that's what you were looking for.
No, but it was great actually. We didn't get to the like how to respond to those things, but we can either. I feel like there's always too much for any one episode. We can either in this conversation or the next episode. But what you all of that you were describing, I was starting to like kind of like take it all in at the same time, and it kind of dawned on me how a big chunk of those factors, it feels like they're just reflections of an individual's understanding of the
Mm,
social world around them. which to me sounds very, very similar to basically what we think about when we think of trauma is like how you feel about the world around you, usually
Mm.
as a result of things you've experienced. And so it's usually big traumatic experiences that can change how you view the world around you, which I would also, connect to this. It's certain social experiences that change your relationship to what you think of the social environment around you. If I've been in some kind of a relationship where something happened that broke my trust, now I'm less likely to trust other people, or at least in that kind of a context, trust people. If I have yet to find a community that I feel a part of, I can't relate to other people, I haven't like connected to anyone or in any group in a certain kind of a way, makes me feel like, oh, I'm too different, I'm too isolated, the world is this kind of a place, I feel like this, I'm this kind of a person. And so, the same way that negative experiences can push someone into a negative place in terms of trauma, but also in terms of social well-being, corrective experiences usually can reshape how people are feeling and experiencing the world after trauma and also after social experiences. I think that begins to start to answer how do you respond to noticing that your social well-being isn't in a good place. But that's not really the thing that came to mind for me. So that's why I was kicking that down the road, that maybe we'll get to that. The thing that really came to mind for me was it. I hate to like place it in this kind of a way, but I'll describe it. That makes it sound a little bit better. It's a bit of a mindset, it sounds like.
Mm.
Whereas wherever your head is, wherever your mind is, in terms of how you're digesting the world around you, seems to contribute a very large proportion of where your social well-being is. And I would even imagine, lots of other parts of your well-being too, since all of these things are so connected. And the specific example that came to mind for me, as you know, I've seen over the last several years many refugees who come to the U.S. They've been through all different kinds of traumatic things, and surprisingly, they are in different levels of intensity of traumatic response to those things that have happened to them. Sometimes they are what you would expect. They are very much within the throes of PTSD, very intense trauma. They have trouble leaving their home, loud noises bother them, they have flashbacks, memory difficulty, all the things that you can imagine that come along with PTSD. And it's very hard for them to find themselves functioning with those symptoms. But we also do still see people who have experienced extremely traumatic things, but they're not exhibiting trauma in that kind of a way, or really in any kind of perceivable way. I'm sure it's had some kind of impacts on them, but the way that they look at the world and at themselves and where their life is heading somehow has altered how they continue to function and continue to move through the world. I'm thinking particularly of this one older gentleman, I believe he's in his 60s. He was imprisoned for many years. I think it's very easy to say unjustly in a Central American prison after all kinds of political mishaps, basically just for opposing the government, just for having an opinion against the government, or being suspected of having an opinion against the government. And he came close to death many times, particularly in the prison. He was close to death. He, was very ill. They were being deprived of all these different kinds of things, most certainly being deprived of human rights. Really, really awful kinds of forms of torture happened to him and the other prisoners. And it was really only by luck that he happened to, the US government made a deal and some of these prisoners were able to be set free and then come to the US. And whenever he shows up anywhere, he is like the brightest person in that room, even though, you could not imagine the darkest things that have happened to him. He is so willing to talk to every single human being that passes him by. You couldn't stop him from talking to a stranger. Any person that he is just, within throwing distance from, he wants to go up to them and talk to them and make friends with them. Only that's only hindered by the fact that he doesn't speak English. He only speaks Spanish. So he'd be, trying to make twice as many friends if he could speak English. And he tells me about how he'll go walking around his neighborhood and he'll talk to all these people who are on their front porch or who are just kind of standing around the neighborhood. He tells me how he has a good time hanging out with this group of people. He made some friends over here. He talks to these people. Everyone is a friend or a potential friend. And I always have so many questions for him about how, after all the things that have happened to you, you've been given so many reasons to think like strangers or people in general are not friends. They're potential oppressors. You've had your own country, your own government, your own, brothers who work for the government literally torture you, literally take all your rights away, change your life forever. You can't go back home to your home country. I would think of all the people on the planet, you have the most valid reason to think I'm done with people. But for some reason, you can't get enough of them. You think that like everyone is worthy of a hello and how are you and what's your story and who are you? The best that I can summarize how he responds to those questions is he says that there's too much to live for to be kind of taken down by, the bad things that have happened. He sees the world as a very trustworthy place. And not only that, he sees it as like there's just so much beyond him and his experiences that there's so many great people left in the world to meet, and that if he can connect with someone, that makes it worth it. If he can make someone smile, that makes it worth it. There's just so much value kind of latently in other people and in relationships and in what could happen, the friends you could make and the people that you could bump into. He just feels like there's so much beyond him and above him that it's far more worth it to keep going, to keep wanting to meet people, to keep trying to talk to people, because I don't know, somehow those negative experiences didn't take that from him. And you can see the impact of the trauma isn't what it could have been. I think the way that he's processed things and digested the world, his outlook on the world, what he thinks of society in general
Mm.
has really altered the way that it's lessened the impact that the trauma would have had on him. He's not afraid to leave his home. He's not afraid of loud noises. He's not afraid of talking to strangers. He's not afraid of the American government, though there might be some things that he should be cautious about. He is someone who is like perpetually hopeful about society, about people, about relationships. And I think there's something really, really powerful in that. I think that's a great example of how, kind of what I was surmising from what you were saying is that what we think of the social world around us seems to be a really crucial part of where our social well-being is at. If you ask him, his family is almost infinitely big because almost everyone he meets, if he's talked to you 2 or 3 times, you're his brother, you're his sister. He often greets me as hermano, as brother, just because, I've talked to him for like a year and a half now. That's just how he is that like everyone is that close to being considered family.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think that's a beautiful place maybe for us to wrap up, and I think we'll continue this conversation in another episode. But just thinking about like how much power he has in his own sense of well-being, that he is expanding his social interactions. He's making one of the things I really love about that is that he's making strangers much more familiar to him, like literally making them family members in some, at least at the language level. If you can overcome differences in that way by familiarizing yourself with other people and having them be familiar with you, there's a real power in that. And I would go as far as, this podcast is worth is saying there's wellness to be had simply by taking that and saying, I'm gonna become familiar with people and I'm gonna let people become familiar with me. And just the support, the hope, the optimism that can come from taking that stance is a really powerful stance.
I completely agree. I don't know if I could do what he does, but I do see the sentiment as being that is the ideal direction to go in.
Well, hopefully that conversation about social well-being is a good kickstart. And like I said, we'll come back and we'll talk more about it. But if you have thoughts and ideas about social well-being, please let us know. We would love to hear your thoughts and how you kind of enhance your own social well-being. So until next time, go be well.